Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to Campus Consortium Foundation's EdTech Think Tank webinar series on education IT leadership on demand, CIO advising, and fractional CIOs. If you have any questions now or during today's presentation, please type them into the chat box or questions pane in the Zoom control panel. Now, I would like to pass the platform to Dr. Carl Horvath, President and CEO at Campus Consortium Foundation.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for joining our webinar today. We have a monthly webinar, that's the EdTech Think Tank series, and we talk about topics that are important to the education sector. Today, we'll be talking about part-time CIOs, fractional CIOs, and CIO advisors. And this is a continuing discussion based on one of our more recent webinars about managed services providers. Before we get started, I'd like to call out a few schools. We have schools from all over the country here today, from west to east, and we have some schools outside of the country as well. And I'll just call out a few of you folks. We do have one of our friends, Darnell Payne from Chicago Theological Seminary. Thanks for joining, Darnell. We have, let's see, we have some school districts joining, and I appreciate you coming in. We have Portland Public Schools. We also have SUNY Erie Community College. We have Middlebury College, Lewis Clark State College. We have Compton College, and we have Qatar University. Welcome. And we have Campbell University. We have New York School of Interior Design, LaSalle University, and many others. We also have some vendors and organizations joining us that are dedicated to the education sector, such as, let's see, we have Amazon Web Services. Welcome. We also have SecureX, which is a IT security company, and we have CampusWorks, and we have a few others. So thanks everyone for joining today. It's good to have this diverse group because it's an important conversation, and certainly this is the trend in education. I would like you, the audience, to please submit any questions you have in the Q&A icon or the chat. We will field those questions during the presentation. You can ask the panelists direct questions also, and they can answer at any time during the presentation. We'll also have an opportunity at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. So let me begin by moving over to the next slide, which will tell you a little bit about Campus Consortium Foundation. This is the topic for today. Campus Consortium's technology association that's been around for a long time, since 2003. These are some of the services. Welcome you to visit campusconsortiumfoundation.org to find out what we do and how we can help your institution. I'd like to start out with a poll question. We'll be asking a few poll questions, and the great thing about these poll questions that we've used them in the past from previous webinars to create EdTech reports. So we take this data and we analyze it. We also take industry information, and then we create a report that we will send to all the attendees and the panelists so they can get a view on the insight and information, both the information provided by the attendees today who represent educational institutions, as well as the panelists who are our thought leaders today. So please take just a moment to answer this question, and we'll give you about 30 seconds. Does your institution employ a full-time CIO, Chief Information Officer? Technology is essential today, and every educational institution must have it. There is no question. Everybody's job depends on it. And Just to take a moment here while the poll results are up, does your institution employ a full-time CIO? Yes, 67%. No, 33%. That's surprising because of the dependency on technology today. You really need strategy and leadership to ensure A, your institution's protected, B, that you advance and grow. So we'll talk a bit more about that and hear from our panelists on that, but very interesting feedback. And so I think everyone that responded is definitely in the right place today because that's the topic of discussion. Back to technology is essential. No one can live without it, not just in our professional lives, but in our personal lives. And in the education institution environment, IT affects everything from workflows, the security, and it also in the strategy, which sometimes is not as developed as it should be because technology aligned with mission and goals can advance an institution and not just have it survive, but have it grow. So important to make sure that we attend to this at all levels of the institution. So new world, new IT staff, we just spoke about the impact on the lives of everyone with technology. And that means technology leaders and technology functional experts have to be different than they were decades ago. Before, it was okay to be a techie and absorb yourself into working on the technology systems. But today, with such a shift to managed services, cloud services, it's different because not a lot of that back-end work is necessary, but what is necessary is working with the institutional community. This is students, faculty, staff, alumni, and others who interact with the institution. So it is important to have a different skill set today than it was years ago. These are skill sets, interpersonal skill sets. These are temperament skill sets. These are social skill sets to make sure that the institution's community can use technology effectively. So who is hiring IT staff these days? Traditionally, it's been the institution HR department or staffing that will advertise and onboard an IT person. And this has changed also since the skill set has to change, the evaluation criteria has to change. It's a full-time job hiring, especially in IT, where expertise in specific areas are necessary. So one thing for HR departments is they need to approach a hire, especially a chief information officer or director of IT, differently than they have before because of cultural fits, because of aligning with the mission and goals of the institution, and for retention, because the last thing you want to do is hire somebody, they leave in a few months. So the pandemic certainly did exacerbate the skill gap problem, which is another issue. It's very difficult to find the functional experts in IT as we did in years past. Today, there's a lot of entry-level employee hiring only because many of the skilled IT personnel are moving to other institutions or organizations, possibly for compensation or for other reasons. And so the pool of available education institution employees or candidates has dwindled. Hiring is a challenge, and here's just some information about from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the U.S. There were in 2022, there's a little bit older data, about 400,000 openings, and that skill gap and the unavailability of IT people in the professional and education areas, sectors will be difficult to find. That means if a IT professional will look at a choice sometimes between an education institution and a for-profit organization, they may go with that because of benefits compensation. Although education institutions offer benefits that a for-profit cannot. And so HR departments also are dealing with, and the institution at large, remote work policies, which is unusual in education. Until recently, when the pandemic hit, it really emphasized, well, why not? And so now that's a big difference in the education sector. Also, retention of employees. There's a faster cycle of turnover and hiring processes with compliance and regulation, as well as making sure you have the right skill sets, especially in the area of IT security. It's critical. So what HR departments and search committees can do is create a wider search process than they may have before, limiting it to education, job sites, and they may want to highlight the benefits that education does have to offer, which is the work environment, mission, and time off. Although a lot of that is changing as the competition for students gets more pronounced in everyone's mission. Retention and enrollment. So everyone has had to step up, including IT, to improve those numbers. So depending on the size of an institution, some of those may be appropriate, but perhaps not, because of the rapid changes in work, the challenge in our legacy practices as education institutions having to change due to current methods and practices. An increasing number of institutions managed, outsourced. In our last webinar, we talked about outsourcing the IT help desk, for example. So internal on-ground IT staff can focus on either fixing on-campus issues, technical issues, or what's more important, helping the university or the college or the school district community help them succeed with teaching and learning, help students be able to submit homework, or help with classroom technologies. This is very important as the dependency on technology and education increases. So these are some of the gaps that managed services or consultants, instead of managing some of these services and supports in our IT departments, perhaps outsourcing some of these or using managed services would be a better, more successful, more effective approach, and also decrease the work that HR departments, search committees, and other folks have to do to onboard and then manage and maintain employees. Not saying that's for everything, and it's not for everybody, but there are benefits to this and to rethinking next time to cover a service or a function or an initiative in an IT department for the institution. So today's topic is more about fractional CIOs or CIO advisors, part-time or on-demand CIOs. I'm sure you've seen some of these words thrown around. There's been a lot more chatter on some of the education publications about this. And today we're going to talk a bit more about the value of doing this and how it can help education institutions, whether they have IT staff or don't, whether they have a CIO or a director of IT or they don't. This can be a valuable resource. It can be accessible for the institution to get to the expertise and experience they need, but it can also be affordable. So many things that fractional CIOs can help with, everything that a CIO does, but it's packaged differently, and it's when the institution needs it. A few downsides to this service, and a lot of benefits in terms of helping institutions maintain what they have and advance beyond what they have to become an institution that they want to be. So one more poll questions before we get started with our first panelist. Who does your top IT leader, CIO, director of IT, whoever it is, report to? President, CFO, or chief operating officer, or some other executive, vice president, and the provost or other? take 30 seconds to please answer the question, and we'll post the results as soon as we get the results on the screen. Well, I'd like to welcome today's panelists. We have two guests that have been on some of the EdTech think tank webinars in the past, and they have a lot of experience and expertise in IT leadership. Isaac Abbs, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for IT and CIO at Pima Community College, and Dr. Rochelle Newton, who's a former IT leader at Duke University and does a lot of work today in the DEI area, and would definitely be able to combine the technology and DEI, which are both important initiatives today. So thank you both for joining us today. And before we hand this over to our first panelist to discuss the topic, one more poll question, folks. And if you could just take a moment to answer the current poll question. The results from poll 2 was, who does your top IT leader CIO report to? Looks like 42% report to the president. And I think what that says is the importance of IT is connected to the leadership of the institutions. And that's so important. It's not that presidents or the top leaders of institutions have to be dialed into every technical programming information or technical configurations for hardware or software. It's that they have to get the concept and how do they use IT effectively to advance their institution. You need a leader in IT to be able to explain that, like you would need somebody from advancement or somebody from student services that has deep experience in these areas to say how the institution can succeed with the expertise of these leaders. Also, we have 50% report to the CFO, COO, and that can be a great partnership between an IT leader and a CFO, especially because technology costs money. And so if that's a good relationship, then that also can be effective. So thank you so much for answering that question. One more quick one before we move on to our first panelist. Do you know if your institution specifically plans and aligns IT with your institutional strategic plan, goals, and objectives? So when there is a strategic plan, is IT part of that planning process? And the reason we ask this is because it's not always just functional. It's not always a IT utility. It can actually empower initiatives, people, enable people to get work done that they may not have been able to do before or may not have been able to do as effectively before with the aid of technology. And so love for you to take 30 seconds to answer that. Looks like you did. And yes, so 50% of institutions are saying yes, somewhat, and then 25% evenly divided between minimal and somewhat. So interesting stats. Will report all this information to everyone post the webinar today. Well, I'd like to introduce one of our seasoned presenters at Campus Consortium Foundation, Isaac Abbs. He is a visionary IT leader, and he has a lot of tactical and strategical experience in IT and in education. I think what has made him a success is not just those skill sets that I presented earlier about social, the interpersonal skill sets. He's very good at all those. And he's also good in terms of the technical expertise because he's got a broad and diverse background, as you can see from directing software development projects, system administration, which can be deep in the weeds technically, to large-scale initiatives and implementation of innovative projects. So it takes someone understanding the technology and the people to make sure that IT is a success, and that is Isaac Abbs. So Isaac from Pima Community College, welcome, and I would like to hand it over to you for your insights on this topic.
Great. Thank you, Carl. Great to be with you all this afternoon, or this afternoon, at least from Tucson. It's the noon hour here, and cool for me, but it's about 67 degrees outside. So I understand it's all relative. But yeah, the first thing I want to talk about is the last two poll questions, because I think they're interesting, because I'll give you my perspective for where I sit. So I personally report to the CFO. And for me, that's a great relationship, obviously, because we spend a lot of money in being directly aligned with the individual that oversees the budget and make sure we have the necessary funding. I think that's extremely advantageous. I happen, though, also to be on the executive leadership team. So even though I report to the CFO, I still sit at the table, so to speak, which I think is hugely important today. Go back 10 years ago, this seat did not sit at the table, and now it does. It tells you where IT's come along the way. And then in terms of strategy, you go back a year, IT here at the college did not have a strategy that aligns with the college's strategic plan. We were really focused on what we need to do day to day to fix IT stuff. This year, I'm happy to say we implemented our first IT strategic plan last July for this fiscal year. And the first part of putting that plan together was ensuring its alignment with the strategic plan. And so we started with the college's strategic plan and just looked at where is IT going to fit in, and then allowed me to work with my peers to say, okay, you have an initiative, but you're going to need IT support. How do we work together, versus them showing up at our doorstep and saying, hey, here it is, and IT not being ready to assist. So just wanted to shed a light on a couple of those poll questions. But yeah, ultimately, I think the role of the IT leader has changed so much. And I think with AI, it is changing exponentially, and it is so important for IT to be a seat at the table. I was just having a conversation with my boss yesterday, and today I no longer feel I'm in the IT business. I'm in the people business. I think really as the role of the CIO becomes less hands-on. I'm a software developer by trade. Sometimes I miss it, sometimes I don't. I've been in IT leadership for the vast majority of my career now, but I'm in the people business. I am dealing with people, whether it's personnel issues, whether it's vendors, managing those types of relationships, obviously working with my colleagues all the way down the organization. I mean, perfect example, I met with faculty yesterday because it was brought to my attention that there was an issue with the student experience, right? And I don't oversee the entire student experience. I have a piece of it. But as a member of the executive leadership team, and in someone who now deals with people more than technology, I wanted to ensure that our product, what we are developing, delivering the experience to students, was good. And so I met with faculty leadership really to get their take and really understand where they were coming from, and then kind of be an advocate. So once again, that's not the traditional CIO role, right? None of that was tech by nature. It was interpersonal. And so every business now, IT is no longer a part of the business. IT is the business. Give me a business process that doesn't rely on IT, and my guess is you can come up with maybe a handful. If IT is going to be that embedded in everything the institution is doing, IT has to be a strategic partner. IT cannot be an afterthought. It's something as an organization we are getting better at, but there's still a lot of times IT is brought to the table way late. IT's got to be there at the beginning, because IT can also help alleviate a lot of pain down the road. That's the beauty and the curse with cloud systems is they're easy to get, they're easy to maintain, but man, they can be dangerous. Someone can go and buy them, show up at your doorstep, and they're like, I bought this. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. And it's like, get IT involved early. I was at a conference a few months ago, and it was an interesting fact was put out there that for the first time ever, the CIO position is becoming a natural transition to the CEO position. And so I think right there, that statement alone says how important IT is to the organization, how critical the role of the CIO is, and how much they have to be a business partner. So yeah, I think it's critically important. I think the pandemic expedited what we all knew was coming, right? There's this great meme on LinkedIn about, what led to your digital transformation? And it's like XYZ or the pandemic, and like everybody's the pandemic. I think it allowed IT leaders to become transformative at their institutions, get a seat at the table, and really be strategic by nature. And so once again, it's extremely important. IT is part of everything we do, everything the institution does. And so I think really having a strategic partner in that seat is critical. And like I said, IT leaders are being looked at to lead innovation and digital transformations. It's no longer, hey, IT, this is what we want to do, now do it. The culture I'm trying to push is, hey, IT, I have a problem. How can you help me solve it? don't come to me with a solution. I mean, great if you do, but I want you to be able to come to me when you have a problem, and then how do we work together on a solution? Because we want a solution that fits into the ecosystem and actually produces value. How many times is software purchased and then the value isn't there, the value that's sold? It's rarely the fault of the technology. It's the people and the processes and making sure those are all aligned. Yep. So yeah, I think the role of the IT leader is critical, important, and I think the value to the organization, the perception in the value is growing. So yeah, so to the staff development skills gap, obviously higher ed is facing major skills gaps, huge unemployment or huge vacancies, key critical vacancies. I have been trying to fill my CISO position for nearly a year. And so when you talk about needing to have strategic partnerships, people you can work with, I think it's extremely important. One thing that we are doing here is we are willing to hire a virtual CISO and maybe a security director if we don't get someone that is ready to be a CISO, right? And so that's a partnership, right? Looking to how can a third party really help augment what we're doing and allow us to still have that strategic vision that a CISO brings to the table. I think, there's, going back some years, we lost, at one time, we lost all our DBAs. We're a banner shop, lost all the banner knowledge in DBAs, and trying to hire them was nearly impossible. And so we've leveraged a third-party managed service to really help manage our ERP environment. It's led to better oversight, better management, I think an overall better experience. We feel that our level of confidence in how that system is being managed and maintained is much higher than it was when we had internal staff. So I think that's where there's opportunities to lever partnerships. I talked about vendors. I think vendors should be looked at as partners. If your vendor is just somebody you are buying something from, reevaluate that. Vendors should be partnerships. I mean, most of my key vendors I have developed partnerships with, right? We end up at a conference, we're meeting up over coffee, over dinner, we're building those types of relationships, because that then means if I need something in a critical pinch, picking up the phone and calling them, I am not just another person. I am someone they've developed a relationship with, and their ability to help me usually is much higher than if I am just a random person in the queue. Obviously, we've had to look internally. How do we grow our own? So, one of my directors have put together an amazing program going some years back where we were able to leverage some funding to hire part-time service desk assistants. So most of our service desks, the men and women who answer the phone, these are part-time employees. And what we've created is this pipeline. So if we need to hire entry-level staff, we are not going out to the market. We are hiring our own. We are hiring these part-time men and women who we've trained and we've developed, and then they are growing, and then so we are hiring from within all the time. Obviously, your front level staff has a lot of turnover, so we have this always full pipeline, which is great because now the training to get them up to speed is almost zero. We've expanded on this year. We were actually recognized by Educause in their top 10 for 2024 for this. We are actually now creating a job shadowing program. So we're taking our frontline staff, as we are implementing new projects, so we're getting ready to deploy VMware Workspace ONE. We're bringing some of these entry level. We created like an opportunity to apply and then be a job, do job shadowing, where now they're learning about Workspace ONE. They're learning about implementing a large enterprise-wide product. They then in their home position will leverage that knowledge to help manage this system, but it will also give them skills necessary to then apply into jobs, to higher level jobs when they become available. So, my deal was, you got to buy talent or you got to grow talent. And we are having a hard time buying it. So we started to focus on growing it. And so I think my last key point is it's okay to need help. None of us know it all. None of us can do it all. I talked about my background by trade with software. I've done some systems administration, but I am not the network specialist. I am not the security specialist. Of course, I have to have a working knowledge at my level. But if I had to jump into the weeds, it would be difficult, right? And so it's okay to not know it all, and it's okay to need help. The worst thing you can do is tell somebody you need help after the uh-oh happens, right? And we're talking about the big ransomware event. That is the worst time. It's a great time to get resources, but it's the worst time to say, yeah, we could have been better if we had help. Get the help up front. Be proactive. I think a big part of this CIO seat is being proactive. we can no longer be reactive as an IT organization. We have to be proactive. And so, so yeah, I mean, that's really kind of where I see the role of the CIO, and really where partnerships and third parties can really help to augment. It's not going to replace, it's going to augment. And I think that's vastly important. So thank you.
Isaac, that great insight. Interesting to hear about problems you're solving at Pima, but you're not just presenting the problems, you're looking at ways to change your practices, so Pima can continue to be a success. I think what you said earlier also, we asked who reported to the president, the CFO earlier. It doesn't matter. I think what really matters is seat at the table, as you said. It is so important to be able to speak to and interact with the other institutional leaders. They will have a discussion. Something will come up that could be solved or changed or completed in a new way, because the IT leaders there hearing, oh yeah, this is what this vice president's problem is, no problem. I think we have a solution for that, instead of someone going out, buying a solution, hiring some other solution, and then finding out that's not exactly solving the problem because that solution didn't have the insight to the bigger picture as you do. So I think that was a great observation on your part, and being at the table is important because it's not just a utility. Now it's driving the institution forward because of the change and the empowering aspects of technology to what people do every day.
If you don't mind, I want to kind of address, there was a question that came up.
Yeah, I was just gonna,
I don't know if I'll be able to address it directly, but I'm maybe indirectly here.
Let me read it. Let me read it real quick. So first of all, are you talking about the question from Dana Miller?
Yes.
Yeah, she's from Dana. Thank you for the question. University of Texas at Arlington. She's a business architect. Great question. I'll read it out, and then Isaac, please address it. And then Rochelle, also, if you have inputs, I'd love to hear that. Here's the question from Dana. In higher education, it appears there is a missing gap in executive leadership education, both at the CIO and above levels, regarding managing the whole system with tools such as enterprise/business architecture and other methods such as lean and agile that can align university strategy with IT delivery. How can this leadership education gap be narrowed? Great question. Isaac, take it away.
Great question. I'm going to kind of come at it from an actual experience. So I've been back to the college now about 18 months in the role of CIO, was away for 3.5 years in public sector, but had 8.5 years prior to that in the college as the director of enterprise systems. So I oversaw software development, business analysts, all that. So one of the things I knew when I came back to the college, because it was a problem when we were here before, is project management, the funnel. We can't do everything. How do we actually ensure that we are focusing our resources on the right initiatives, the right projects, looking at the bigger picture, looking at the whole? So we got a group together. So we have a matrix PMO. So there's project managers that report to the different various areas of IT. Got that group together and really worked on how do we control our funnel? We can't control the flow. Like every day, someone's got an idea and an initiative and a project, but we have to control what we can do. So how do we actually pick up the right projects? How do we ensure they're aligned with strategy and whatnot? So we worked with a partner, IT research partner, to really put together a sound project intake and prioritization process, where we are actually scoring requests, we're doing business cases, we're ensuring they align with strategy, with the learner experience, right? So we are objectively ranking these projects so that we can determine which ones do we think we should work on. And we're also doing resource allocation to determine which ones we have capacity to do. But IT doesn't make the decision about who does what, right? We take that to a governance group that says, okay, based on the work we've done, here's the projects 1 to N. Let's just say 1 to 10. We have capacity to do 1 to 5. Are these the right 5, right? Group from across the college, if you think that's wrong, right, bring your input and let's switch it around and we'll come up with our top projects. So we have a new chancellor, a new interim chancellor. Our previous chancellor was very, very innovative, very let's do everything. That culture has kind of gone away a little bit, which is refreshing because now we know we can't do everything, so we now have an opportunity to focus on what we should. Well, the business, right? My executive peers have come to me and said, how is IT doing it? We don't know how to control the funnel. Like, we don't know how to not try to do everything. How can we do it better? How can we do it differently? So now IT is actually educating the entire organization on how we are strategically picking projects and working on initiatives. So great question is, how do you close that gap? I think the CIO has to be an educator, right? They have to be willing and capable of educating their peers and educating the entire organization, because there's a lot of things that IT, by nature of being IT, has processes that are extremely critical to the organization and can actually be leveraged across the organization in other areas. And so I think that's how you close that gap. It is through education, it is through best practice, and it's working collaboratively and willing to share ideas. But you have to have an executive team that's also willing to listen. So I think if you have an executive team that doesn't want to hear what the CIO says, it's not going to work. But if you have one that's willing to listen, and usually that's through success that they're willing to listen, I think there's opportunities to close that gap. So
Isaac, that good insight. You're right. The understanding of the value of IT has to be throughout the entire organization, and especially at the top. I do have workshops where I invite presidents of colleges, universities, school district superintendents, and talk about the value of technology at a high level so they can use it like a resource. Many of them understand finances, maybe not deep in the weeds of finances, but they certainly understand the value of finance. And now IT has become like that. So what I tell them is spend your IT wisely. Let me help kind of orient you on that, because you may be missing an opportunity. And it doesn't mean, again, they have to be technical. They just have to understand the value that it can bring for their goals and objectives. So thanks for that insight. Rochelle, any inputs on that?
Yes, please. Dana, I would just add, what I often do is I offer these listening tours. And what that is just putting together a little package of video chats for leaders so that they can hear the value of what we're getting ready to do. So before we implement anything, we offer these little small Zoom, and everybody hates Zoom, but these small little Zoom chats. Here's this new technology. Here's what it does. If you want to hear more, we can set up a broader Zoom talk about this technology. And it goes all the way up to the provost, the president, the CFO, anyone who wants to listen about this new technology, because someone has approved this technology. So before we implement it, here's what this technology does. Do you want to hear more? Please contact us to hear more. And that's what we normally have done. And that's really worked well.
Excellent. Thank you, Rochelle. Much appreciated. And before we move on to Dr. Newton's presentation, I would like to have another poll question. Does your institution have updated and relevant IT policy and procedures? It's interesting how many schools I talk to that are so busy dealing with day-to-day IT issues. And this goes for maybe sometimes policy across the institution too, that you don't get to update them as often as you would like. But with IT, especially since there's so much change, innovation, you can't have a policy that was written in 2012 that talks about maybe floppy disks and DVD players. You really need to update that because how many things have changed and been introduced since that time over the past 10 years. So it's important to have updated and relevant, not just policies, but also procedures. Purchasing. One procedure I can talk about a little bit is IT purchasing. We can't let the entire institution just buy whatever they want, because sometimes that can expose the institution to risk unnecessarily, and there may be a solution that's already there for people to use, so that also could save money. So really important to include your IT department on any of those purchasing decisions. So looks like yes, 27%, some 64%. So folks, you're trying. That's a good thing. And no, 9%, not surprising. I mean, there's so much to do. But again, if you, it may seem like a lot of work, but leveraging someone to help that's affordable, but has the expertise and experience, like a CIO advisor or fractional CIO, can really pay off and protect the institution in ways that they wouldn't be protected if that wasn't implemented and updated. So I would like to now introduce our next panelist, Dr. Rochelle Newton, longtime friend of Campus Consortium Foundation and presenter. Also, as Isaac Abbs is, Dr. Newton is very fiscally and process and procedure aware in terms of her leadership and management, but she's also an innovator. And one of the keys to her success has been to build strong teams and ensure that everything she works on includes continuous improvement. Her philosophy is she always likes to leave any project or any initiative better than when she found it. And that has served her well in thousands of projects that she's worked on over the years. She's also founder and president of EdTech, which is an organization dedicated to equity. And so, Dr. Newton, thanks for joining us today, and would love to hear your inputs on this topic.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. So I will say this, we all have seen what has happened in IT with COVID. COVID has really changed the landscape tremendously. I have been in IT for a very long time. I started out on IBM mainframes, and I often tell people that this is the only humor I know. But I'm only 19, and this gray hair is not mine. I had it sewn in, so it's not really my gray hair. So that's my humor. So get over it. So anyway, what we have seen in IT over the years is pretty much what Isaac has said. We saw IT where in my case, we were in a dark closet locked away, and it was like they threw in food to us because they didn't believe we were civil and human. So they kind of threw IT off to this dark closet. And we eventually have come out of the closet to being a part of the mainstream of what organizations have seen. We are an integral part, so much so that we are more than just the part that support. We are a part of IT, so much so that we are necessary for us to do what you want to do. So if you're going to build a car, you need IT. If you're going to build burgers, you need IT. Whatever it is, IT is necessary. So you cannot see us as an afterthought. We are the thought, as Isaac said. But more importantly, now, we are remote, we are in person, we are hybrid, we are all of these things. But in addition to that, COVID showed many of us that working in person is as much of a draconian thought as working remotely or working somewhere else, working in some other country or something, but also that cybersecurity. How many of you have been almost dark or thought about going dark? Cybersecurity is everything now. Ransomware is an important part of this. So have you thought about how you do cybersecurity? I mean, how many of you know what a honeypot is? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about how you do, who has access to what resource? Have you thought about that? These are things that people like us think about all the time. How do we stay secure? Have you thought about your people? What would happen if one of your key members up and left? Do you have redundancy built into your work? Have you thought about your documentation? One organization I was working with, 3 of their key members left in one day, left. There was no documentation. There was nothing left about where anything was, who was doing what, who had access to what. Are you prepared for that? Have you thought about that? Do you have key members in place that know where everything is? Have you thought about all of these things in place? What happens if your CIO were to leave? What happens if Isaac were to wake up tomorrow? He got a phone call from the federal government saying that they wanted him to be the new CIO. What would happen to Pima? These are the kind of things where, CIO advising, fractional CIOs, redundancy needs to be the thing of the day that many of us need to think about, not just thinking about having CIOs and CISOs and other folks like this. You need to have redundancy. You need to have documentation. You need to have backup plans. And if you've been in IT as long as I have, redundancy used to be the word of the day. You don't hear people talk about redundancy anymore, but redundancy is so important into what we do. We need to have strong CISO plans. You need to have plans. What happened? So where I am recently, a school had to give away plans to all their football games because they didn't know how to charge for the plans because their systems went dark. Thinking about how that works, what would happen if that happens? We had one school, which happened to be how I got my job at that school. They failed an audit because all of their student email addresses went public. Thinking about these kinds of things are absolutely necessary. So you need to build strong teams. I'm a strong believer in the team. The team to me is almost everything. If you don't have strong teams that communicate with each other, believe in each other, coordinate with each other, are talking to each other all the time, who are working with each other, that's the first part of every strong organization, is to have strong teams. The other part is working across the aisles, right? So if your IT is siloed over here and they're not working with payroll, they're not working with HR, they're not working with accounts payable, you failed almost immediately, because if your teams aren't working with other parts of the organization, I always tell my IT people, embed yourself with HR, embed yourself with accounts payable, all of these teams, because if you're working over here and you're only doing IT over here, you miss the mark. I think what Isaac said was beautiful, that you're all over the place. You're not just IT here, you're IT everywhere. That when orientation starts at the beginning of the year, you're in the orientation. You're sitting there just like everybody else. That you're part of CIS, you're part of reporting every part of everything that's going on in your organization. IT is front and center. You're not the afterthought, you're the thought, right? You're there presently. One, you have experienced people who know what they're doing. So whether you have hired them permanently as a part of your staff, or you have them as fractional, or you're advising, whatever, you need that. You need people that are always communicating with each other. So I'll give you an example. When I was working at Duke Law, our CISO left and went to work to another part of Duke, and I was giving his responsibilities. Now, I had not done CISO in forever, what Isaac said. So this was not my skill set. So I didn't have the skill set. So no one in my team had the skill set. So we reached across the aisle and we found someone to work with us to get that skill set in place. We were able to do our work. We didn't miss a beat. What I had strong collaborative skills coming in from everywhere. So that's one of the things that you must have, is you must collaborate with people all the time. And collaborative work is important. And it's not easy. People talk about collaboration all the time, but it's really not easy. It's easy to say, but collaborative work takes time. So it's also important to make sure that as you're working on these kinds of things, that you are opening up dialogue all the time. So you don't let the door close. Once the project is finished, you don't close the door. You keep the door open all the time. So you finish the project, you're on time, you documented all this stuff, you train the team, but you also open the dialogue afterwards. After the project is finished, you go back and ask, hey, how did we do? Is everything okay? Do you need anything else? The other part of this process that I think is so important about fractional CIO and advising is to also think about where are you going next? You see what's happening down the road. So when we first did the cloud, we went with Amazon Web Services, wonderful, beautiful situation. But we didn't think about where we're going from there. We only saw what was right in front of us. It's important to think about what's next. What's your next steps? Where are you going from there? So Amazon was so great with us. They saw what was next. So you should be thinking about what your next steps are. So as you're planning on your steps, when we first thought about the cloud, we were only thinking about this part of the cloud. So Isaac said this perfectly, and I think Carl said too, use your vendor relationships to think about, more than just, because they can see things that you cannot. If you're developing your vendor relationships, not only just going out to dinner, but also thinking about how do you expand that relationship to do what's best for your organization. So if you don't have the staff that you need, have your vendors work with you to think about how they can help you and step in and be a resource for you as well. The other thing I'll say, so Carl mentioned this, so when I left Duke, when I started my diversity company, because the lack of leadership in IT positions at the senior level, and that work has been really fulfilling for me, because there is not a lot of Black and brown people in senior IT leadership positions making decisions. But the thing that really is important to me in that work is that Black and brown people and older people, dinosaurs like me, we have more to contribute than you think. Give people a chance. Just don't make decisions based on what we used to do. We can still add value if we consider people who are different from us. We don't all have to look alike and walk alike and think alike and talk alike. Differences are very important in the work that we do. And with AI coming into the frame, I helped the group set up ChatGPT to do some of their help desk work. And I will say that has worked really well. But AI has biases in it that are not necessarily friendly when it comes to doing certain types of help desk work. So, for example, I'll give you one example here. Someone was writing a paper about violence in the Middle East. And I don't know if you know very much about how AI uses terms like Middle Eastern terms, specifically in certain parts of the region. And every time that person would write a part of the paper, it would find these one things it would narrow its research on, and it would only do that certain part of work. And so the help desk was having trouble, pulling that out of the ChatGPT and finding these specific things. And I wrote to some of the folks at OpenAI about this, and it was really interesting that they could not figure out why. It was just finding that one piece of the research. But it leads me to this one piece. As you're thinking about using AI tools, remember there's bias built into some of these things that are so deep in it that if you're using it solely as your help desk tools, you may find that bias may come out not in your favor. So if you're solely using AI tools to solve your help desk problems, remember, some of these tools have a bias baked into that AI. So I would just say, just think about those kinds of things as you're considering AI as your help desk solution, as I think many small companies are thinking about it as a tool for their, service desk or help desk solutions.
Thank you, Dr. Newton. Appreciate that. Good insight, good advice. Things are changing, from what we're hearing from both our panelists. I think both of them eloquently described where we are now in the education sector and where we must go to be a success. So I would say that I just wanted to thank you both for great insight, and we're going to make sure this is available to all our attendees today. Two more comments. One, speaking of Amazon Web Services, Jan Day, who has joined us today for this presentation from AWS, had a comment, and Jan says, it is one thing to have procedures, it's another thing to be actively testing them, practicing them, so your technology works. For example, backups, access protocols, and your team knows how to respond effectively, especially in disaster recovery and cybersecurity situations. Great advice and input. How many of these, not just policies, have gone by the wayside because we don't have time to update them, but these important tabletop exercises and these plans in case a ransomware attack happens to the institution, how do you react? We have another comment from an attendee, Joe Van Kieft from Central College. And Joe says our prior CIO died of COVID, and he was our network expert. It has taken over a year and a half to recover. Thank you for both those comments. And I'm so sorry, Joe, that had to be very difficult. But I think it speaks to not just the preparedness of our institutions, as our guests, our panelists have discussed today, but also rethinking how we acquire that expertise. And so Campus Consortium Foundation does have access to a network. I had another person ask about this. We have a network of IT leaders. Even Isaac and Rochelle will offer some services to institutions if we make sure it's a right fit. And we make sure it's affordable and that you get the expertise and experience that you need. So whether it's a part-time, whether it's on demand, whether it's a fractional CIO or an interim CIO for that matter, we can help with those. Not just CIOs, but also CISOs. We've had quite an uptick in CISOs recently as well as, and so we've been able to help out in those situations as well. So please reach out to us if we can help connect you in any way. But one more poll question, folks. Can't let you go without a poll question. Sorry about that, but it's all good because we will be able to use this in our reports and get these out to you. Does your institution provide adequate support for IT projects, support operations, IT customer service? Yes, no, or outsourced. And thank you for joining also, Maura. Maura, great to see you join our presentation. And Emery, long time no talk to. Thank you for joining as well. And any last words from our panelists before we sign off for the day?
Just want to thank you all for joining us today, and once again reiterate the fact that the CIO role is critical and it's strategic. I think if I was going to answer that question about, what's the first thing I look for if I only can get like a part-time CIO, someone to help develop strategy. I think that is paramount to everything else that comes after it. Put together a strategy. Everything we talked about falls under strategy to some degree. I think that is the key. It sets the blueprint for where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. And so that would be my advice is if you only have the funds to get a part-time CIO, work with them to develop a strategy. Similar what we're doing with the IT security role is we're having third party really help us put together a program and a strategy that then we can maintain.
I would just say, back up, document, research. Have as much documentation as you possibly can, because you never know what's going to happen, and have that in a central place where someone can go find it, because you never know what can happen. We used to say back in the day, your whole team might get hit by the bus. Make sure there's at least one place where you know where to go find the information.
Or COVID. Yes. Happens. Yep, yes. Yeah. Not to joke about that. It's a reality, though. And we do have to be prepared since we depend on technology so much. So I want to thank both of you, Isaac, Rochelle, as usual. Excellent input and insight. Results of our last poll: does your institution provide adequate support for project support operations? Exactly, speaking to what you mentioned about project management and all these other activities that are essential to IT. 44% said yes, our institution does, but 44% also said no, we don't. And this is where the value of having some fractional support or part-time support can really help with these areas. You may have a good operations, day-to-day operations, but this is where you can get the support as needed without having to expend a large amount of cash or a higher resource for this. And then 11% said outsource. So you can see that trend is growing. That numbers were lower before, and now they have really been increasing lately. So special thanks to Pima Community College, Duke University, and our team, Jennifer, Sam, Hector, Harvey, the event support team that always makes this webinar a success. Thanks to our sponsors, Prelude, 9-Star, Oculus, and Nasdaq. And also one final item is you may want to look at the Campus Consortium website to see our CIO advising section that we do have a current program that's available to institutions. to provide them support. And please check us out. In the meantime, thank you all for joining today. I am looking forward to seeing you next time here at the EdTech Think Tank webinar. Have a great rest of your day.